If you were one rent payment away from losing everything, what would you sell? Your phone. Your furniture. Your dignity. Tonight's story begins at a quiet curb where a woman with shaking hands stood under a broken streetlight, whispering a price she didn't believe in, until a stranger on a motorcycle pulled up, killed the engine, and changed the ending she thought she had to accept. Stay with me. Because by the time we reach the last minute, the person you think is being rescued will be the one doing the rescuing, and the road out will be wider than a single act of kindness. The night felt like it had swallowed the city whole. The neon flicker of a pawnshop sign buzzed in and out, buses exhaled tired smoke and carried other people's lives to places where pillows awaited and doors had locks. Nadia hugged herself against the wind, trying to squeeze courage from her ribs. Her rent was due in the morning. The red numbers on her phone glowed like a wound. 2 weeks since the daycare closed, 5 since the company downsized her clerical job, and 1 long month of "I'm sorry" messages that weighed more than any debt. Her landlord had been clear: tomorrow, noon. Or don't bother coming back. He said it without malice, like announcing the weather. No room for pleading, no appetite for tears. Nadia had opened her mouth to explain: her mother's medication, her brother's school fees, the fact that she'd sent out 34 resumes in 7 days, but explanations don't pay rent. She closed the door gently, as if quiet could change the math. And so she found herself at the edge of a decision she never thought she'd meet. She had tried to sell her phone, then her last gold bangle, then the old camera her father left behind in a shoebox. It was never enough. A whisper within her tried to reason: it's just one night. You'll keep your keys. No one has to know. Another voice, the one that sounded like her mother's, trembled. There are some doors you don't open even once. She lifted her chin anyway, forced steel into her spine, and stepped from the pool of the streetlight like she was stepping into a photo she didn't want to remember. A car slowed, then sped up. A motorcycle approached, its chain singing a low, metallic note. It stopped, precisely, as if guided by something other than brakes. The rider's helmet reflected the streetlight in a warped oval, her frightened face curved inside it like a secret. He flipped up the visor. Eyes first, steady, not hunting. Then the rest of him came into focus: a scar at the corner of his mouth, the day's stubble, a jacket with a patch that said "Open Hands Garage." Not handsome in the way magazines prescribe, but solid in the way bridges are handsome. He glanced at her shoes, dust gray flats, then at her hands, raw from dishwater and too much cold. "Hey," he said, voice easy. "You look like you're standing at a cliff." "I'm fine," she lied, keeping her gaze somewhere between his shoulder and the distant bus stop. "Okay," he said, accepting the lie as a courtesy rather than an insult. "Do you want coffee? There's a stall 2 streets down that makes it strong enough to apologize for the day." She shook her head. "Don't be seen. Don't be anything." The plan in her stomach twisted. "I'm Kareem," he added, as if the name might purchase a moment of trust. "I know what a cliff looks like." He didn't reach for her. He didn't make the moment about him. He simply parked his bike, set the kickstand like a period, and leaned his forearms on the handlebars, giving the night permission to be less dangerous for 1 more minute. Silence pressed between them, not empty but careful. "I need money," Nadia said at last, each word a small surrender. "Tonight." "Me too," Kareem said, and one corner of his mouth tipped wryly. "But my rent guy is my cousin, and he likes me enough to pretend he didn't see me." "You don't have that luxury, I'm guessing." She exhaled a humorless laugh. "No. Do you want work?" he asked. "Not someday. Tonight and tomorrow. We're doing a graveyard shift at the shop, inventory, polishing, some bookkeeping. It's nothing glamorous. Cash in hand." She stared, trying to figure out where the trap was hidden. "Why me?" "Because you're standing at a cliff," he said, as if the answer were obvious. "And because we need extra hands. And because I watched my sister sell her textbooks to pay an electric bill once, and I'm still mad at the world for making her choose like that. Her chest tightened. This sounds like charity. Charity doesn't ask you to work, he said lightly. It just asks you to take. I'm asking you to clock in. There's a difference. Tears threatened in the brittle corners of her eyes. She blinked them back hard. I don't know anything about garages. You know how to count, he asked. How to read labels. How to tell the truth when a number is wrong. Yes. Then you know enough. She hesitated, the wind pawing at her coat. Somewhere in the distance, a siren. Somewhere nearer, an argument leaned out from a window and then retracted. She thought of the landlord's noon. She thought of the ad she had remembered and not yet had to answer. She thought of walking home in the morning with something she couldn't wash off. What if you're lying, she asked, which was another way to ask, what if I'm a fool? Then you can take a photo of my ID and send it to whomever, Kareem said. I'll even add a selfie with the coffee stall guy. And I'll pay you for the hour even if you turn around at the door. The shape of the night changed. Not lighter, exactly, but less suffocating. Nadia pulled her coat tighter, took a breath that didn't scrape, and nodded. They rode in cautious quiet. The city looked different from the back of a motorcycle, electricity stitched the streets together like a net. At the coffee stall, Kareem followed through on every promise. She photographed his ID, texted it to her cousin who'd keep quiet, bagged the takeaway cups in case staying felt safer than sitting. Open Hands Garage held its name like a vow. The back gate was open, inside, light pooled on clean concrete. Not what she imagined a garage would smell like. Fewer oil ghosts, more citrus from fresh wipes and the warm vanilla of new tires. A young woman in a beanie rolled a cart of brake pads toward a shelf and grinned. Overtime emergency, she said. You must be the cavalry. This is Nadia, Kareem introduced. She's running quality control on my math. The beanie wearer, Aisha, as Nadia would later learn, showed her a clipboard, a code sheet and a stool. The numbers made a kind of music in Nadia's hands, a rhythm she hadn't felt in weeks. Check quantity. Match code. Tick box. The first correct column was a tiny sip of pride. The second went down smoother. By the fifth, a warmth had spread behind her sternum that wasn't from the coffee. Around her, the night moved. Kareem sorted parts with a focus that suggested respect rather than drudgery. A radio murmured a late-night show host telling jokes too old to belong to anyone. The clock in the office kept time with a soft, gratifying tick. Midnight arrived, 2 a.m. waltzed in, 4 a.m. came meek and gray. With every 20 minutes, the shape of Nadia's fear changed. Not gone. Not even thinner. But reorganized, less like a monster, more like a bill you can plan for. At 5:30, Aisha slid an envelope across the desk, the way you slide an apology or a thank you. Inside, cash. Enough to cover a third of the rent. Enough to replace the ad in her mind with a different kind of phone call. Come back at 9, Kareem said. You'll sleep for 2 hours on the break room sofa and then hate me forever, but the morning shift is drowning. We'll make the rest. Why would you do this? Nadia asked, her voice gentle, like not to scare the reason away. Kareem wiped his hands on a towel and considered her. Because someone did it for me. Because we are all, what's that thing, temporary versions of each other. And because I'd like my sister's ghost to get some good news. Nadia closed her fingers around the envelope. She didn't say thank you. Not yet. She was saving it for the moment she could say it without it sounding like surrender. She went home as the sky pinked into a tender bruise. The landlord's noon kept time inside her chest. But now there was a plan. She rested her eyes without sleeping, set an alarm, and woke like a soldier. At 9, she returned to the garage, her hair pulled back with a rubber band that decided to be brave. They worked. They laughed once, twice. At 11:30, the second envelope joined the first in her bag. At 11:55, she stood at the landlord's office. He looked surprised when she placed the money on his desk, surprised and maybe a little disappointed to be denied the drama. "You're late," he sniffed, out of habit. "By 5 minutes," she said, out of a new habit, and placed the last 3 notes on the pile. "Paid in full." He grunted, then checked his ledger as if to punish the numbers for their compliance. She didn't wait for the final thud of his stamp. She walked out with her keys, still hers, singing like coins in her pocket. Back at the garage, Kareem nodded when she returned. He didn't make a speech. He pointed at the shelf that needed her attention and threw in a smile that felt like a small sunrise. That night, Nadia slept for 12 hours, dreamless, and woke to hunger she trusted. She had survived one cliff. There would be others. But she had new terrain now, a place where her hands made order and her eyes caught errors and her hours returned with interest. The city hadn't changed. She had, a little. Enough that when she locked her door from the inside and stood in her kitchen, she allowed herself one forbidden luxury: she believed, briefly, that she might be okay. Most rescues end when the credits roll. Nadia's didn't. It unfolded in unglamorous increments, the way wounds stubbornly become scars. In the weeks that followed, Nadia became the sort of person who knew where the good pens were hidden and how to calm a customer who'd been promised, first thing in the morning, for the 3rd day in a row. She learned why pads squeal, why estimates make people honest, why a machine's health can carry a family's hope. She catalogued parts like memories, and the bookkeeper, a wiry man named Majid, taught her to translate invoices into sentences she could understand. Kareem was the same as that first night, kind in a quiet register, stubborn about safety, allergic to spectacle. He pushed his team, but he also cooked on a single electric burner in the break room every Friday: rice, beans, curry that made everyone forget to be serious. Sometimes he'd lean on the workbench after closing, talking about nothing, about motorcycles that wouldn't make sense to her even if she tried, about the way the city tasted better on a Tuesday than on a Sunday. He never asked for Nadia's story. She told it anyway, a little at a time, to the group, to the room, to the safe hum of the fluorescent lights. A mother's medicine. A brother named Sammy who collected small rocks and bigger questions. A father whose camera she had not sold after all, tucked behind a bread tin because memory is sometimes worth more than bread. The first time Nadia got to say, "Let me help," instead of, "Can you help me," it was a Tuesday, and a woman walked into the garage with a face Nadia recognized like a mirror, a face at the edge of a cliff. The woman clutched a crumpled note in one hand and a dead phone in the other, asking in a voice that tried to sound practical if anyone wanted to buy a wedding ring, no questions asked. Aisha opened her mouth to tell her there was a pawn shop 2 blocks over. Nadia's hand moved first. "Are you hungry?" she asked. The woman looked as if she'd been offered a lie. "I need cash." "And you'll get it," Nadia said, calm as paper. "But food first. You can't negotiate with your stomach shouting." They sat her down. They split the leftovers Kareem kept for days like this. The woman said her name was Hina. Her landlord had a dog that barked at midnight. The barking felt like a countdown. She had a son with a cough. Her ring meant less than his lungs. Nadia watched Kareem stand back long enough to let her lead. It felt like he was handing her the handle to a door she'd been knocking on from the wrong side. "We have a night inventory shift," Nadia told Hina. "Cash in hand. It's not charity. I'd hate it if it were. It's just work someone needs done." Hina's eyes filled with tears that didn't fall. "Why?" "Because we're all temporary versions of each other," Nadia said, and Kareem, across the room, didn't look up, didn't smile, but she could feel the way his silence warmed. By the end of the week, the garage had accidentally become a place. Word traveled the way it always does, through cousins and stall owners and the kind of rumors the city nurtures when it's trying to believe in itself. A standing fan appeared from nowhere. A bookshelf grew in the corner, seated with novels left by customers who'd finished waiting before finishing a chapter. People who didn't own cars started stopping by. They weren't saints. They charged for work, wrestled with budgets, raised voices when parts arrived late. They didn't save everyone, no one does. They started losing money on Fridays, when the rice pot was too generous. Majid complained while sneaking extra ladles into the bowls. Aisha scolded a kid for skateboarding near the jacks and then taught him to clean a carburetor. When the landlord raised Nadia's rent 2 months later, it's the market, she didn't float. She hurt. She did the math, made a plan, and brought it to Kareem without embarrassment. They tacked it to the breakroom bulletin board like a blueprint. Line items, goals, a rough timeline. We'll raise your hours, Aisha declared. Or mine. Or both. Kareem added small gigs, drop-off deliveries on weekends that paid better than they sounded. The team didn't say the word family. They didn't have to. It already hung in the air like the smell of coffee grounds, quietly everywhere. Then came the crash, because life, like traffic, doesn't keep its promises. It was the beginning of monsoon moods, when the sky couldn't tell if it wanted to be a curtain or a drum. A driver in a hurry hit a puddle that became a lake, braked too hard, and kissed the back of a bus. The bus sighed. The car wept oil. Sammy, walking home from tutoring, saw the smoke and stepped back, slipped, and struck his wrist on a curb. He called Nadia not because he was brave but because he didn't want to be brave alone. I'm okay, he panted. It just hurts like it's trying to teach me something. Nadia ran. The streets turned into throat-tightening distances. Kareem saw her drop the socket wrench and go and went without asking, the bike a sudden animal tamed. He found them 2 blocks away, a boy who looked like someone's whole world and a sister trying to be a weather system large enough to protect him. Get on, Kareem said, not to be heroic but to be practical. The hospital waited with its sterile songs. The rain waited with less patience. They moved. In the emergency room, under the fluorescent mercy of triage, everything slowed and sharpened. The X-ray showed a fracture that would heal with time and obedience to boredom. They left with a sling and a debt. It would have wrecked Nadia 2 months ago, a bill shaped like a wave she couldn't surf. Now it was a wave she could dive under. They added it to the bulletin board with a pen that had become fearless. The night became a story they told in the break room with extra salt on the fries. Kareem mimed the nurse who'd scolded him for acting like he was the one in the sling. Aisha high-fived Sammy for looking villainous in a cast. Majid promised to teach him one-handed typing like a hacker in a movie. It wasn't that the pain didn't matter. It was that the center of gravity had shifted. They didn't pretend rain wasn't wet. They brought umbrellas and towels and hot tea. On a Thursday that smelled like new tires and relief, Nadia brought her father's camera to work. She had repaired the strap with dental floss and stubbornness. She wanted to take photos of the place that had become a before and after in her head. She crouched to capture a bolt glinting like a coin. She tilted the lens to catch the way Aisha's hands moved when she explained a carburetor to a teenage girl who might become an engineer if the world had the sense to let her. She raised the camera when Kareem wiped his forehead with the heel of his palm, not heroically, just humanly, and caught him laughing at something the radio said. Send me that one, he asked shyly. For my mom. She collects proof that I'm okay. Nadia nodded and tucked the moment away. Later, she'd print it for the breakroom wall, where it would embarrass him and make everyone else grin wider in its direction. Later, she'd take another photo, a woman at the curb under a streetlight, no longer whispering a price but waiting for a bus with a face that had learned its own geometry again. The city never apologized for the way it made people kneel. Nadia didn't ask it to. She only asked for enough small mercies to stand. The real ending unfurled on a night that looked like the first one but felt different down to the marrow. Nadia had closed the till, balanced the day's hum, and stepped out to breathe under the sky. She saw a figure across the road, lit wrong by a weak lamp. A young man hunched into himself, jaw clenched, eyes doing that darting arithmetic desperation performs. He checked his phone. He checked his pockets. He looked toward the kind of car that stops for people and then doesn't. Nadia recognized the cliff. Her body remembered the cold calculus of it, the way your palms sweat even when the air is a knife. She walked over slowly, rehearsing the first sentences that had helped her. Are you hungry? Do you need work? It's not charity. It's a shift. She wasn't a savior. She was a person whose hands had learned how to turn handles. She crossed the street, felt the night check its own breath, and said, "Hey. You look like you're standing at a cliff." The young man blinked as if she had spoken his private language. "I'm fine," he said, without conviction. "Okay," she said, granting him the dignity of the lie. "There's a stall 2 streets down. Strong coffee. We've got a night shift that pays cash. No strings. You take a photo of my ID and send it to whoever makes you brave." He studied her face, searching for the cost. It took him less time than it had taken her. He nodded. They walked back to the garage, the city stitched to their footsteps the way neighborhoods sometimes are when they remember why they were invented. Kareem looked up as they stepped in. He didn't beam. He didn't tease. He grabbed an extra clipboard and a good pen, the one that wrote like it meant it. "Inventory," he said, sliding the pen across to the newcomer. "We pay at 2, then again at 6. Nadia watched the way the young man's fingers settled on the paper like a bird deciding a branch was trustworthy. She felt the past complete a circuit with the present and light up the future like a string of bulbs that had been waiting for just one more plug. "Why do you do this?" the young man asked, echoing a question from a different night's air. Kareem glanced at Nadia. She answered, "Because someone did it for me. Because work is a bridge, not a prize. Because we're all temporary versions of each other." The night breathed easier. The radio murmured an old song. The clock ticked like a reassurance. In the break room, a pot of rice waited its fate. On the bulletin board, new goals sprouted next to old ones. On the street, the same landlord who had once practiced indifference headed home to a dog that barked at midnight, and maybe, just maybe, he would soften when he realized the barking sounded less like a countdown and more like a reminder to check who needed what. When the envelopes came out at 2 a.m., Nadia counted slowly, as if blessing each note. Not because money was holy, but because what it represented could be. Not rescue. Not charity. Not debt. A hand extended at the right angle, not down to pull you up, not up to demand tribute, but forward, as if to say, walk with me until we both forget there was ever a cliff. And if you've stayed with me to this last minute, remember this, she didn't keep her roof because a man on a motorcycle saved her. She kept her roof because when someone paused long enough to offer work instead of shame, she found the courage to choose a different story, and then wrote a chapter for someone else. That's the road out. Not one engine, not one hero. A line of open hands, a streetlight that becomes a lighthouse, and the knowledge that whatever the city takes, we can learn to give back to each other in ways it can't count. That's how she didn't sell herself for rent. That's how he stopped. And that's how both of them kept going.